The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
Cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So which is it, a real crisis at the border or a manufactured crisis? Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Trump drives Democrats up the wall with his demand for more border security. The president goes on national TV first on Tuesday evening, followed by Chuck and Nancy. So who won? Who lost? Was it a draw? Did it advance the ball for either side? We'll talk all of that through. And then the key question, will Trump invoke his power as president to declare a national emergency to get the wall built with an end run around Congress? Jim Fite, legislative correspondent and editor-at-large for LibertyNation.com, will join us to discuss the legislation that would allow such a decision and the many potential pitfalls in the whole process. The cult of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's become a rock star and goddess of socialism. We'll bring in LibertyNation.com editor-in-chief Leesa K. Donner for a mini debate on whether this 29-year-old freshman congresswoman is for real or headed for a fall.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off with our signature segment, Say What, as we roll out some of the most wacky, astonishing, and damnable things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. When President Trump delivered his first ever nationally televised address from the Oval Office Tuesday evening, the Democrats had their talking points all lined up, or manufactured, and compiled by Tucker Carlson of Fox News.
All state that this is a manufactured crisis and a crisis that manufactured by the Trump administration.
This is a manufactured crisis, Bill.
How he manufactures crises like immigrants seeking legal refuge.
What the president is doing is manufacturing a crisis.
President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
A manufactured crisis. We get it. But that's typical for a political party. But the remarkable thing is how the elite media parroted the exact same talking points.
Folks, the president has manufactured one heck of a political crisis for himself.
Donald Trump is manufacturing a national security crisis.
You will hear them say is that this is a manufactured crisis. It's not a national security crisis.
From Nancy Pelosi down to Debbie Wasserman Schultz or anybody else who will give him a dime for this project.
Because
so
it's manufactured.
It's a manufactured crisis for the president to get a political win.
We have a president who will go on TV tonight and lie and lie and lie some more. This is a manufactured crisis.
Monkey see, monkey do. The establishment media in 100% lockstep with the Democrats' talking points. But at this point, we should hardly be surprised. Likewise, the attention-getting words of the most Trump-deranged so-called journalist of them all, CNN White House, quote, reporter, unquote, Jim Acosta talking to his buddy Chris Cuomo.
Well, Chris, I think that that address probably should have come with a Surgeon General's warning. It was hazardous to the truth.
Acosta, again, serving as a mouthpiece for the left and the Democratic Party. The dueling speeches of Trump and Pelosi and Schumer were panned by the media, Trump not in his best form with no adoring crowd surrounding him, and the Democrat leaders looking like deers in the headlights or a Saturday Night Live satire as they stood uncomfortably close, sharing a podium meant for one person. Even longtime Democrat strategist James Carville admitted that not just Trump, but Chuck and Nancy hardly looked comfortable.
I don't think they wanted to do it. I don't think they should have done it. The only good thing about it, it didn't matter. They could have given a Gettysburg Address and it wouldn't have mattered. It didn't. It was just different. He didn't want to be. I've been more excited about colonoscopies than he wasn't giving his speech tonight.
So, where do we go from here? Well, Trump was able to make his case before a national audience far larger than the people who watch politics on cable TV. And the man who may actually upstage Trump as the nation's most colorful Republican, the ironically named Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, said the message to the American people and intransigent Democrats is hardly complicated.
This is really very simple. Legal immigration is good. Illegal immigration is bad. One way to stop illegal immigration is a border wall. We know that because we have one in San Diego and Yuma and El Paso and on the West Bank in Israel and in Hungary and in Saudi Arabia and in Bulgaria. And I could keep going. Borders, barriers work. Duh.
You know, when Senator Kennedy retires, he'll have quite a future in stand-up comedy. But as far as the stakes for Republicans in this continuing partial shutdown, with neither side budging an inch, Senator Lindsey Graham went on Fox News and issued a warning to his own party.
To my Republican colleagues, the only way we lose is to give in. If we'll stand firm, put deals on the table that make sense, we will win this on behalf of the American people. But if we undercut the president, that's the end of his presidency and the end of our party, and we deserve to be punished if we give in now.
A red line drawn by the Republican elder who also admits the difficulty in dealing with radical open border leftists.
There's 700 miles of fencing has been authorized since 2006. We just want to build what we've already agreed to do. But you're dealing with a group of people who see their government as the problem. They see the Border Patrol agent as the problem, not the mob. They see the ICE agent as the problem, not the illegal immigrant they're trying to go after.
So who's got the high ground in this ongoing battle over illegal immigration? Matthew Continetti of the Washington Free Beacon said on Fox News that the Democrats seemed to have the advantage before Tuesday night's address by the president, but that might well be changing.
President Trump and the Republicans continuing to talk about border security. Pelosi and Schumer, though, now shifting focus to the government workers, because maybe they're not on a solid political ground if it is them being intransigent over a fence or wall that they have voted for in the past. And I also have to wonder, here's Nancy Pelosi's restoration as Speaker of the House, and she's going to spend, her first month dealing with this and not all of that liberal wish list that she had wanted to pass legislation on. So I continue to believe the longer this drags on, the more leverage President Trump has.
Now, Nancy Pelosi proved the point about the Democrats trying to change the subject when she went on camera after meeting with Trump on Wednesday and played the violin for federal workers set to miss their first paycheck.
Many federal workers will not be receiving their paychecks, and what that means in their lives is tragic in terms of their credit rating, paying their mortgage, paying their rent, paying their car payment, paying their children's tuition, and the rest. The president seems to be insensitive to that.
Well, Pelosi may be trying to change the subject, but what is she to do when the far left of her own party continues to press the point that a wall is unnecessary and immoral? When you've got new upstart progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez out there on MSNBC making statements like this.
The women and children on that border that are trying to seek refuge and seek opportunity in the United States of America with nothing but the shirt on their backs are acting more American than any person who seeks to keep them out ever will be.
Right. The people trying to enter the country illegally are more American than the people who want them to enter legally. Has Ms. Ocasio-Cortez become the face of the new radical Democratic Party? We'll talk that over with LibertyNation.com editor-in-chief Leesa K. Donner a bit later in the show. But in the meantime, talks between the president and Chuck and Nancy have gone nowhere, with Senator Schumer sounding like his and Pelosi's meeting with Trump Wednesday was little more than a playground fight.
He asked Speaker Pelosi, will you agree to my wall? She said no. And he just got up and said, then we have nothing to discuss, and he just walked out. Again, we saw a temper tantrum because he couldn't get his way, and he just walked out of the meeting.
Both sides taking their toys and going home. So what's left for the president to do to end the impasse over border security? We'll take a quick break and then come back and discuss the viability of the president declaring a national emergency as an end run around Congress.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
President Trump sallies forth as the first president, really the first politician, willing to put his political career on the line for the issue of illegal immigration. But as we've discussed, both Trump and the Democrats have boxed themselves into opposite corners with not a single sign that either is going to reduce their demands. Trump for $5.7 billion for a border wall or physical barrier, as he called it in his address from the Oval Office. Pelosi and Schumer offering zero and demanding that the government be reopened before they'll even address the issue. Trump's base unalterably opposed to any compromise on this. The leftist base demanding that the Democrats not give the president a dime for his signature project. So it may well be that President Trump will use his Trump card, the power granted by Congress to the president to declare a national emergency. And here to explain how he might pull it off is LibertyNation.com's own legislative hound, editor-at-large, and legislative correspondent Jim Fite, who wrote an excellent piece on it this week on LibertyNation.com. Jim, welcome, and let's start by having you lay out the legislation passed by Congress in 1976 that may enable the president to declare a national emergency and get his wall built without the funding he's trying to extract through the legislative process.
Thanks, Tim. And, the National Emergencies Act of 1976 is the law we're talking about here. This law was passed most likely in response to two previous presidents who had tried to use national emergencies to do things that Congress didn't want done. So this kind of limits the power that a president has as far as what he can do once an emergency is declared, but it also lays the official groundwork for how to declare that emergency. And in this situation, the president absolutely can declare an emergency. All he has to do to declare an emergency is to name the emergency, declare it, transmit that information to Congress, and file it in the Federal Register. The sticky part is that in order for him to have any additional authority during the emergency, he now has to actually cite some law that grants it to him.
Right. Now, you point out, as you say, where it gets tricky is how Trump can actually get the funds, divert the actual funding that he needs to build the wall absent legislative funding or funding through the legislative process. What are the possibilities for that?
Well, there could be a lot of possibilities. There are a quite literally uncountable number of laws in this country. And the last estimation of how many laws there are that grant additional executive power during emergencies is somewhere around 400. But so far, the only two that really seem promising that have surfaced that I've seen, there may be some more that have been found since, are 33 USC 2293, which allows for the termination or deferment of civil works projects from the Army Corps of Engineers, and 10 USC 2808, which allows the Secretary of Defense to redirect military construction projects.
All right, so those are the two bills that you pinpointed in your article on LibertyNation.com is how we can actually get the funding, because I think what people need to understand, right, is that declaring an emergency is quite different than securing funds needed to take action during that emergency. Yes?
Absolutely. We actually, it's not that uncommon for an emergency to be declared. It happens almost every time there's a hurricane. The issue, like you said, is now, he wants to build this wall. The Democrats in Congress don't want it done. So he has to find a law, or someone has to find a law for him that gives him the authority to move funds around, funds and personnel to do this. Now, either of these laws, assuming that there are enough money left in the coffers to do it, and that he can frame the construction of the wall properly for either one of these laws, would work, or so it appears. Unfortunately, he can't use both. He'll have to pick one, because it'll either be military construction focused on the defense of the nation, or it'll be a civil works program. So,
As we continue with Jim Fite, legislative correspondent and editor-at-large for LibertyNation.com. Jim, even Trump-deranged analysts like Jeffrey Toobin at CNN admit that the president would likely succeed in declaring a national emergency, but the Democrats have always been able to find some federal judge to rule anything Trump does as unconstitutional before it goes up the ladder all the way to the Supreme Court, which would delay the process by several months. How would this be any different?
The law actually lays out a pretty clear path, assuming that the president can find a law and can tie it successfully to the wall itself. And I guess those will probably be the 2 points of attack for the Democrats, is whatever option Trump goes with, he's going to have to kind of spin it so that it really fits. Okay, here's the problem. This is the law that gives me the power to solve it, and here's how I need to solve it. So he has to position the wall as the solution to the problem laid out in whichever law he chooses. And I think that's probably where the Democrats are really going to try to hit him. The problem with that is that if he can successfully do that, it's a fairly clear path. I mean, it's not to say that they won't try to stop him. I'm sure they will, but I don't know how successful they would be. But I will say this. There's a team of lawyers at the White House digging through these laws. They're more experienced than I am. There's more of them than I am. They're more likely to find something that definitely works than I do. And if and when they do, I think it'll happen.
Okay, Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you weighing in on this. Weighing in on what may become a very weighty matter sooner rather than later. Appreciate you joining us. Jim Fite, legislative correspondent, editor-at-large for LibertyNation.com. We'll take a quick break, then come back and debate the relative merits of the left's new rock star, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The very mention of her name sends a thrill up the legs of leftists and a chill up the spine of conservatives. She became a rock star after she knocked off the fourth highest ranking Democrat in a primary last summer and then was elected as a freshman congresswoman at the tender age of 29. As a self-declared Democratic socialist a la Bernie Sanders, but about 50 years younger. So, is all the attention, the love, and hate she's attracting from both sides of the aisle likely to last, or will she be more the shooting star who falls just as dramatically as she has risen? Here to debate that question is LibertyNation.com editor-in-chief Leesa K. Donner, who, for the first time in recorded history, has a somewhat different opinion than her husband, me, about the charismatic Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Hi, Lise.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
I am okay. Now, let's put the ideology aside for a minute. The young woman is an avowed socialist who's become the face of the ever-expanding left-wing base of the Democrat Party, and we both thoroughly reject her ideology. Let's instead focus on whether her cultural appeal as a charismatic young woman of color is the right kind of fresh face for the Democrats to put forward, in contrast to the old morticians, Pelosi and Schumer, whose response to Trump on Tuesday night looked like something straight out of Saturday Night Live. What say you?
Or the Lurch and Morticia. That was a perfect analogy.
Lurch and Morticia, or Gomez and Morticia. No, Gomez was too dignified.
Yeah, I think it was Lurch and Morticia. But anyway, you brought up a couple of interesting points. Number one, she's a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Number two, she was a big Bernie gal. Number three, she interned at the Immigration Office of Senator Ted Kennedy way back when. She's a dyed-in-the-wool socialist, but I do think there is something of a novelty there, because the Democrats are kind of running retreads from Biden to Clinton to Nancy Pelosi, that she does have a novel appeal, which is why she said in her campaign, women like me aren't supposed to run for office. She's playing off that novelty.
Well, my point of view is that I kind of admire her in a way for getting so many uptight conservatives all hot and bothered about things like her dancing and her shoes. I mean, in a way, is she not kind of the left-wing version of Trump, getting constant attention, I mean, beyond the level we've seen of any freshman member of Congress we can ever remember, by making, outrageous statements and using social media to gain a huge audience of both lovers and haters? Isn't she kind of admirable in the way she's been able to sort of attract that kind of following?
Well, I do agree with that, Tim. I think she is trying to play the left's version of Donald Trump. In other words, I'm different, I'm special, I'm unique, and I'm going to say whatever is at the top of my brain without thinking it through, and tweet it out. But there is a fundamental difference between AOC and Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been at it for a while. He understands the ups and downs, the difficulty, the trials and the tribulations. I think this young woman is just kind of riding a wave, and I sort of see her as flaming out pretty hard at some point. Maybe not any moment, but I do see her flaming out pretty badly, because she doesn't have quite the gravitas or the experience, the life experience that, say, a Donald Trump has had.
The G word, gravitas. I had to figure that would come into the conversation somewhere. But, let me make an opposite point, which is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has made many outrageous, patently socialist statements, and several inaccurate statements, like the one about why the unemployment rate is so low because so many people have multiple jobs. I mean, it didn't make any sense. So she's already made a bunch of statements that don't really make any sense or advance an ideology that's way out of the mainstream, and yet she remains, a lightning rod. So if she said all those things already and it hasn't brought her down at all, what would bring her down?
As I said, I think it's her lack of experience, her lack of being able to separate the forest from the trees. I see her as someone who is a shooting star, and I don't see her as someone with longevity. I just don't. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be. If you look at any news feed today, you'll see there's like 15, 20 stories about her. Well, wasn't that true about Michael Avenatti as well? Wasn't that true about Stormy Daniels as well? Wasn't that true about a number of people that have just gone from the scene and flamed out? And I think because this woman is not terribly bright. I mean, she did graduate cum laude from.
And she's very well spoken. I mean, you may not agree with what she says, but she phrases things in a way that's, actually, betrays a fairly articulate manner, in my opinion.
Yeah, but then she says stupid stuff like the 7 branches of Congress or something, of the government. I mean, she doesn't strike me as running on a lot of IQ points. That's just my take.
Let me advance a devil's advocate argument here that we're in an age, as evidenced by the election, the shocking election of Donald Trump, where people are sick of traditional politicians. They're sick of people who are polished and who have their set talking points and, poll every belief or every statement before they make it. I mean, is she not the right person for the right time, in the sense that she's not a traditional politician, just like Donald Trump?
Well, but if just being innovative just being novel was enough, then I think Bernie Sanders would have done better. He's pretty out there.
But he did do well. I mean, he almost stole the nomination from Hillary Clinton. He came very close.
Where is he now? He's pretty much faded. I do not see this 29-year-old woman as having a lot of staying power. She has captured the media, the leftist media, and is their darling for the moment. Also, you have to look at what percentage of Americans are democratic socialists. Is she
not a high percentage?
Yeah. Is she representing a lot of people when she says, I'm for a 70% tax rate? You tell me.
However, she is someone who can frame, for example, the Medicare for All issue, which would pretty much bankrupt the whole country. But she's able to position it as something that might be attractive in the sense that, well, yeah, healthcare now seems to be a right in the eyes of the American people. And she's sort of playing into that.
Let's not forget, her and Nancy Pelosi, they're not best buddies here.
Well, that's a key point.
And Nancy Pelosi's going to do everything in her power to shut this woman down. I think Nancy Pelosi is not a fan of AOC.
I think there's no question about it. And I think that the speaker is very threatened by Ocasio-Cortez and the other upstart, bold, left-wing members of Congress who were elected in this last cycle. Well, interesting topic. We'll keep our eyes on her, to be sure, this young Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Thanks for joining us, Leesa.
All right, and don't forget to stop by LibertyNation.com. We have plenty of articles, including some on AOC, if you can take it.
And don't forget to subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel. That is Leesa K. Donner, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com. And after a quick break, Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we welcome you to the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitle Talkin' Liberty. Makes sense, doesn't it? As we welcome in our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Tim, it makes sense to me. I love talking liberty with you.
Well, indeed, and we're going to do that again today. And, you know, Scott, I always like these discussions we have when they start with effects on liberty that the average person experiences almost on a day-to-day basis. And most people, or many people, drive, and there's a couple things regarding the things people don't like when they drive that are among the stories we're going to cover today. And we start in the bastion of liberty known as Oregon, where a federal judge has cleared a red light camera critic. The story doesn't actually involve the camera so much as the critic, but what the heck? It's a twofer, isn't it?
It is a twofer. It's a great story. And to coin a, not to, belabor the point, but where the rubber meets the road, Tim, for so many Americans, their interaction with the state occurs at the wheel of the car. That's where they're pulled over, where searches are done, where oftentimes rights are implicated and violated by the state. So that's why there's so much law there. And you're right. I do like to kind of bring it home because that's where so many people can relate to these government overreaches. So the hero in this story, Tim, is Mats Jarlstrom. He's an engineer, and he lives in Oregon. And he wrote a letter to the state Institute of Transportation Engineers, because he was mad that they produced dangerously short yellow times for their red light cameras. And as you might imagine, Tim, that produced more violations and more revenue for the state, right?
Certainly you're not suggesting that was the intent, Scott.
I haven't. God forbid, Tim. No, let's not. Of course,
let's
veer off into that.
Clear here. Yes.
Yeah, let's not veer off into that territory. So he wrote them a letter, and he said, protesting this improper engineering, and he indicated that he was an engineer when he signed that letter. Well, boy, I'll tell you, the state doesn't like it when you challenge them. And the Oregon State Board of Examiners for Engineering and Land Surveying saw his email and decided to fine him for $500 for the crime of practicing engineering without a license. Now,
I'll tell you what, he could get a mass of people to protest on his behalf. A mass of people.
He is an engineer, just to be clear. He's not a professional engineer licensed by the state of Oregon to sell his engineering services, right? So, but he wasn't, again, selling anything. He just signed his own letter of protest with his own credential. So anyway, he sued, and it's a great judgment, Tim, whereby the U.S. Judge, the magistrate judge Stacey F. Beckerman did the right thing and stripped the Oregon State Board of Examiners for Engineering and Land Surveying's power to punish people who call themselves engineers without paying the government. They can't call themselves professional engineers for hire, right? But if you are an engineer, and if you think, Tim, there's all kinds of engineers. There's software engineers, right? I mean, that's an engineer.
As long as you don't ply your trade in a way that upsets the people at the top of the power structure.
Or complain when they try to get their pound of flesh from you.
Indeed. Now, staying with the whole traffic thing, speaking to drivers, a federal court has upheld a traffic stop over a fast blinker.
Well, that's right, Tim. I think this is a sad case because the person was operating their vehicle within the bounds of the law, operating their blinker within the bounds of the law, but the law requires it to be in good working condition. Well, sometimes, because of some electrical system issues, a blinker can go into a fast blink mode. Well, that still tells the other drivers that you're indicating a turn or a lane change, right? And that's the purpose of a blinker. Well, the court ruled here that it was okay for the cops to pull over this car, and They will use anything is the point of the story, Tim, to be able to pull somebody over. And let's think about how
they'll always find something, right? I mean, because there's always some kind of violation going on in every single vehicle on the road if they look hard enough for it.
If you have to travel more than 20 feet, you're darn right, Tim. And you have to think about how invasive it is when the police pull somebody over, how ruinous it can be to somebody's day. It's not okay for state agents to seize members of the public absent a compelling reason. And it's, I think, pretty disappointing that the 11th Circuit here says that a fast blinker is a compelling enough reason to seize the citizenry.
Well, Scott, certainly you're not trying to drain the coffers of the police department and the politicians who grant them funding.
No, certainly.
But we'll give you a pass on that one and move on to another First Amendment issue, a lawsuit for professors at Chicago State University. God forbid they criticize the administration. You can't do that, Scott.
That's exactly right. And that's why the blog on which they were criticizing them was ordered shut down after the administration decided, well, in the delicate balancing test between Philip Beverly and Robert Bionaz's First Amendment rights and the administrators being free from criticism they disfavored, they waited on the side of being free from criticism. So they did shut down that blog, and those professors were covered $650,000 and an agreement to not continue this sort of thing. And Tim, I think it's really great. This is part of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education's litigation project called Stand Up for Speech litigation project. We talked about it before when it launched, and this is another pelt on their wall of a university who they've sued for these speech violations, and they're continuing to do it.
And I think that this kind of action and this kind of decision will make others in the future think twice, make other college administrators in the future think twice about when they try to suppress any criticism of their actions. Now, this next one, I have to admit, I was a little reluctant to talk about this because I thought I'd kick the tongue twister in it, but this is about a federal judge in Iowa. Let's see if I can get this right. Striking down Iowa's ag-gag law. That's
right. You got it. And that's agricultural the gagging of people who want to report on agricultural what's the right word here? Mistreatment of animals or treatment of animals that looks off-putting. And oftentimes what they would do, Tim, is this is a sort of the animal freedom type people go on to animal treatment processing centers or farms where they hope to capture on video horrible treatment of animals, which they can then use to denigrate animal production and consumption generally, and also the specific instances of abuse that they witness. And they actually got the state of Iowa to create a crime called agricultural production facility fraud. It's pretty fantastic that one class of people didn't like the speech of another class of people. Now, there are civil remedies for somebody who videotapes, on your private property without your permission, right? But that's not what happened here. It's sort of a private criminal law was created. In any case, you can imagine the First Amendment implications, prior restraint implications here are pretty massive. I was always shocked that it took this long, Tim, for the law to get stricken down. But stricken down it was. A federal judge in Iowa basically granted the Animal League Defense Fund, one of the plaintiffs, the ruling. And they said in the ruling itself, the nation well knows that one of the costs of the First Amendment is that it protects the speech we detest as well as that which we embrace. So a lesson there for Iowans who don't want certain speech to go forward.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio, and LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by me and Scott and Leesa K. Donner, are available to you on demand anytime, anywhere at LibertyNation.com, and, of course, from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.